Thank you, Ashley and Rennie. And good morning and welcome to those of you who are joining us online today. You know, we've been in the process of studying Myrtle Fillmore's book, Healing Letters. And I think it's so interesting because many times over the many years I've read this book, I've never asked myself, how is it really that Myrtle healed herself? In other words, Healing Letters is a compilation of letters she wrote to people in response. They wrote to Myrtle for prayer, or they wrote to Myrtle's prayer group, which we now call Silent Unity, for prayer. And back in the good old days, you know, before someone would text you an answer, you actually would write something out in longhand. You would put a stamp on it. You would put it in the Pony Express, and you would take it across the country to answer. Well, after Myrtle died in approximately 1932, people said, you know, Myrtle never wrote what we might call lessons or a treatise, something like her husband Charles wrote several books, and they become the mainstay of Unity. But Myrtle never wrote anything like that. But she wrote thousands and thousands of letters. It was a big event announced in the Unity News that Myrtle Fillmore had gotten a typewriter back in 1919. And she just thought that was something really great, but she still preferred to handwrite to those special people, you know. So after she died, they said, we'd like to compile some of these letters. So people sent them back to Unity, and this is the result, or this book then becomes the result. It was published about 30 years ago. And what I love about Healing Letters is they're quick read. I love quick read things. And they're like a snippet for the day. Page and a half about healing. Page and a half about prosperity. Maybe a page and a half about any sorts of things that she was being requested to pray for. But still the question remains, and rather challenges me, is that what did Myrtle do in some sort of logical, sequential order for her own healing? Those of you who are not familiar with Myrtle's healing, at the age of 43, she was dying of tuberculosis and malaria and various and sundry other diseases. Through prayer and meditation, that's as much as I can kind of tell you in kind of a systematic way, that she healed herself and lived another 43 years, becoming the founder, with her husband Charles, of the Unity movement. So I was pondering this, you know, how is it that this woman here, what were the sort of magic ingredients? What was the secret sauce, the 7 steps? What did she do in order to heal herself? And we've talked about that over the last month, the little snippets here and there that we could glean from her writings. Yesterday, we had our annual retreat out at Osage Forest of Peace. And I love Osage Forest of Peace. It's becoming sort of a part of our church, even though it's out in Sand Springs. And my favorite place in the whole grounds is the hammock right outside the main room. So I looked out and I didn't see anybody out there, and I thought, oh, it's my turn to get in the hammock. And you know, yesterday was a beautiful day for a retreat. It wasn't too hot, it wasn't too cold, it wasn't rainy, it was cloudy, it wasn't so sunny. So we walked the trails, we had a process time. And in the morning, I always schedule time for people to walk the trails, to be silent, to sit in the hammock, whatever they might want to do. So I got into the hammock, and as I was laying there and kind of swinging back and forth, I happened to really notice it, and I've been in this hammock many times over. I happened to notice the tree that was holding it up. Obviously, there were 2 trees, but my feet were facing that way. So I was looking at the one tree, and I thought, that is a huge tree, an absolutely huge tree in terms of height, but it was not in terms of girth. And so as I'm swinging back and forth, I reflected on, you know, this tree, maybe 20, 30 feet in the air. It was a beautiful tree, and there were 2 of them holding up this hammock in which I could swing most freely. And I thought, what holds this tree up? Here's a great metaphor. Here's a great lesson. What holds this tree up? If not a taproot. And it has to be a big one. Because the taproot is exponentially long to the height of the tree. And I learned all about taproots. Some years ago, we planted 5 trees, and they all have names: Rocky the river birch, Howard the shoe-marred oak, Molly the maple, Dorothy the Chinese pistache, and of course the beautiful Japanese maple over here on the other side. And when they were planted, I don't know why they turned to me. Do I look like a horticulturist? But they said, listen, here's what you have to do. You have to water that tree at the trunk all summer long. And it was a really blistering hot summer, I want to tell you. And I said, why? Why can't I just water the lawn? And they said, because these trees, especially the shoe-marred oak and especially the Chinese pistache, are going to grow to be really, really tall trees. And for the first 3 to 5 years, you're not going to see anything happen. So dutifully, every so many days, I'd walk out there with the hose, and I'd stand there, and I'd talk to Howard, I'd talk to Rocky, I'd talk to I talk to all my trees, because they do grow better when you talk to them, you affirm them. And this poor little oak out here, it wasn't as tall as I am, which isn't saying a whole lot, and I thought, geez, this thing is never gonna do something. Come on, Howard, let's get with the program here. But she told me 3 to 5 years that this tree was just going to be there. Because while I didn't see anything, what was happening? That taproot was going straight down. Down and down and down. Because she said after about 5 years, you watch, that tree is going to go straight up. Now, if you've noticed that tree lately, it is starting to grow straight up. It is becoming a huge and beautiful oak tree that is going to make this whole side of our street sheltered and shaded in just a few short years. So I thought about the lesson of planting the trees here on our own property so many years ago, and how I was so meticulously instructed about that taproot. So here I am swinging on this swing, and looking at this tree thinking, how big is that taproot? And how it is not seen, and the roots are not seen. It's not searching for water like trees do. It's got a taproot. And I thought to myself, therein is the essence of what Myrtle tried to tell us. You see, the work really happens under the ground, in the taproot. Those 2 trees I'd like to call faith and trust. We have to have a faith in something that is unseen, a faith that is something that we draw from, a faith that tells us there is more to life than just our physical body. Where does healing come from? We must let go of the fact that healing comes only from the medical community. The medical community is important. Do not misunderstand me. But they are not the healers. They help heal, but they do not heal. What heals our body? And even beyond that, what heals our mind? What heals our soul? The things that we can't see, the things that we can't touch. It is that deep, deep taproot that goes way into the core and fiber of our being. And it goes beyond that into the very center of the universe, if you will, whatever image or analogy works for you. And it goes farther and farther into the infinite mystery of life with a capital L, from which draws up the nutrients, draws up the strength, draws up the wholeness, draws up the life, draws up the inspiration and the understanding that is eventually works its way out into a tree, into a whole body. We have this idea that when we pray, and Myrtle tells us very clearly, it doesn't always work out the way you think. Now, it's true that Myrtle Fillmore was healed physically, lived another 43 years. But there came a point where even Myrtle had to drop her physical form. Our physical form, therefore, is not the end result. But you and I all know that when we hurt, when we are frightened, I have a friend in New England that's going through breast cancer. And she had surgery and the chemo and radiation. And there's a lot of fear, isn't there? There's a tremendous amount of fear when we hurt and it's unknown and we don't know what's going on. And to remind ourselves that we have the faith, we have the strength, we have the courage underneath the surface that eventually will work its way out. And if it doesn't work out in the wholeness of our body, it always will work itself out in the wholeness of our spirit. It has to. The universe is a holistic event, and that's what we're looking at here. So we need the tree of faith to remind ourselves that regardless of the outer appearance of things, deep down, deep down, well, we can't see it, and we can't feel it, and we can't even know it. It's there. And at the second tree is the tree of trust, that it too had planted taproots deep and strong into the soil in order to be just as high as the first tree that I was looking at. To trust that there is an outworking here. There is a place where we must do our work, and there is a place where we must rest. I think it's so interesting that the hammock, of course, swings freely in the middle, right? We go there to rest. We go there to renew. We go there to take some time out. I think it's critical to understand also that we're not talking about simply laying back and letting it roll over us. A lot of people misunderstand what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 6 of the Gospel of Matthew. He talks about how the birds of the air don't worry, they don't sow, they don't reap, the lilies of the field are so beautiful. So I've often heard people say, well, that means God doesn't want us to do anything. We just kind of sit around and wait for it to happen. No. The birds of the air don't sow or reap because it is their nature not to sow and reap. It is our nature to plant, to sow, and to reap. We have bodies. They are action beings. It is not the lily's job to look beautiful. The lily is beautiful. It's not your job to look beautiful or whole and healthy because you already are. The claiming of what you already are brings us into this place of incredible rest, where we know that we find that balance point between the working, the faith, and the trusting, and to see the outworking of it. Myrtle Fillmore lived that so completely. It was amazing. And even to this day, after all these years I've been in Unity personally, her story still inspires me. Because I think to myself, how did this little woman of really no consequence, truly. I mean, she was just a little housewife on the corner of, 9th and Tracy in Kansas City, Missouri, with a life-threatening illness, was not expected to live till December of that year, had 2 young children, and somehow this woman changed the course of the world. Wow. Because she had faith, not in, I hope, I wish, gosh, oh, won't this be great? But she had faith in something deeper. And every time you read one of her letters, that's what will be a resonant theme throughout the entire book, is that she will say, the first premise is that you must believe. You must believe that there's something bigger than you. You must believe that there's something greater than you. You must believe that there's a wellspring that you can draw from, and then you must trust in its outworking. And it is not ours to say it needs to work out this way, because we've got to let that go. We have to let it go, because in the end, we don't have any control anyway. We just swing freely. And isn't it nice? When you think about swinging on a hammock or in a swing or anything like that, you're so carefree. When we have faith and we have trust, we know a certain spiritual freedom. And yes, it is true for all of us. Our fear comes up. Yes, it's true that when we don't know what's going on and we feel sick, and because we've been talking about illness this month, when we feel pain, we want to get over it. But it's a process and a journey. Because ultimately, as I was there and rocking back and forth, then the hammock began to slow, till finally it came to a stop. My rest was over now. It's my time to get up and walk, my time to engage the world. I've been renewed between the pillars of faith and trust, renewed by that blessed spirit in between. So looking to Myrtle and see what she has to tell us here, and just a commentary on some of her, reading some of her writings. She said, a period of quiet and rest each day is your opportunity to establish yourself at the center of your being. Isn't that true? Between faith and trust, we need to center in. And when we lose focus, what do we need to do? Run around and consult Google? Or do we need to go and say, wait a minute, stop. Just stop. Have you ever heard yourself say that? I have. Just stop, Marianne. Just stop. Now breathe. Just breathe. Okay, now go forward. She says, the one place, being at the center of your being, is the one place where the supply of life and substance is inexhaustible. God is this eternal life that we make into a living. Each day you should have a period of stillness when the soul may gather sustaining power and restoring life. Don't you love that? Each day you should have a period of rest. Now it does not say, be very careful here, it doesn't say for 3 hours you need to meditate, burn incense, be chanting special songs. It's just a moment of silence, a moment of quiet. And you and I all know in our busy, racy world, a moment of silence, a moment of quiet is hard to find. And I think that's why we go to the forest. Because in the morning time, we have a little gathering time, and then we go to the forest in silence. What is the sound of a leaf falling? What is the sound of the leaves underneath your feet as you walk the path? What is the sound of some animal, deer, something scampering through the woods? What is the sound of the wind in the trees? Silence isn't always so silent, but it brings us back to this energy and to this center, because she says, when we come to the center, I love that, it is the sustaining power and the restoring life. God gives freely. It is for us to keep and keep the channels open, to keep attuned to the realities so that our intellect does not take us out among the limited ideas of the world. And there it is. When we get nervous, when we get fearful, when we get it happens. I am, preaching to my own choir here. Then all I want to do is hear, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to find out what's your opinion. And all along, I said to people sometimes, well, what do you think? Well, I don't know. I've researched and no. What do you think? I told my doctor one time. She was going, well, you got to do this. And I said, that's not right for me. She said, I beg your pardon? I said, this doesn't resonate with me. And fortunately, I have a wise enough doctor who stepped back and she said, well, then tell me. Tell me more. Tell me what's speaking, so I can follow your train of thought, so I can follow your logic, so I can understand that you're saying that all my diagnostic tests say it's this, and you are saying no. What is it that you hear? What is it that you know? And she allowed me to explain it a little further, and we investigated it a little more, because I didn't run off. And trust me, that's one example, because a lot of other examples are where I ran off to the world and tried to figure it out. But when we can really anchor in and say, what is it that I'm feeling? What is it? I'm angry. Okay, am I mad? Am I a little bit upset? Is there a fly in the room? Am I enraged? That's anger. Can I define myself? And this takes work, and we all know it. And this is our work to do. Because she says you can stay in the silence too much. See, that swing will eventually stop. And it's time for us to get up and to reap and to sow. It's time for us to do the legwork. It's time for us to understand and explore the journey. It's time for us to take what we have gathered, take what we have learned, take what we have garnished from the 2 trees and the long, deep taproot that we have pulled up into that center place that allowed us to just swing so freely. You know, another thing that was most interesting to me is that the hammock was not strapped way up high. I mean, this tree, the trees were probably at least 20 feet high. But the hammock was only about 6 feet where it linked onto the tree. We don't have to go all the way to the top. We don't have to do it all right. We don't have to follow all these rituals and regulations. All we have to do, and Myrtle will say this over and over and over again, is to be still for the moment. To be grateful in the moment. To be one with the moment. For in that moment, as we understand and we trust that that taproot, that wellspring is deep, 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 it's growing, and maybe we don't see it on the surface, just like the trees all around our church property. For years, I didn't see anything. I was sure most of the time they were dead. And sure enough, here they come. Sure enough, they're going to turn color this fall. Sure enough, here they are, huge, massive trees. What does that tell us about us? Sure enough, there is that presence. Sure enough, there is that one power. Sure enough, there is that one life. Sure enough, there is that wholeness and wellness and courage and strength. But we must trust that that taproot is equally deep. And when we hold on to that trusting taproot, we allow it to unfold as it does. We allow the journey to process as it should. We live the questions until we have the answers. And when we have the answers, then we know that we know that we know. This is our journey. This is our calling. This is our life. So I truly invite you to grab a copy of Myrtle Fillmore's Healing Books. It's on Amazon and many other places. You can get them used, of course. And to really savor the nuggets of a woman who didn't leave us maybe a great step process or a well thought out book that we could read from chapter to chapter and know exactly what to do. What she left us with is a legacy of faith and trust. What she left us with is the importance of being on that swing, and how being on that swing is the renewing force of life. 43 more years she lived, a testament to that which she taught, that which she wrote, that which she believed. Thank you for joining me today, and God bless.